Hello everybody, welcome to day 5 of our Orchestral Programming micro course. Today we're looking at the sound of the room, ambience, reverb, mic positions, all that kind of strange magic elixir stuff. And as ever, there's PDF underneath this video which you can download, and there's summaries of all the stuff which we're talking about. If you want to subscribe to the channel, I won't mind. I won't burst into tears if you do, and it will remind you about stuff like this which we do in the future, so it's worth doing. So do the little bell thing. Right, the sound of the room. In many respects, where your sample library is recorded is one of the most important decisions, because what you're buying is not just a sample library. You're not just buying all the programming, you're not just buying all the musicians playing their instruments, you're buying the sound of the space in which it was recorded. And if we take, for example, probably one of the most famous partnerships, which is Spitfire and Air Lyndhurst, if you look at that space, you can tell what it's going to sound like. It's a big, beautiful ambient space. It's a world-class studio. So what you're buying is a world-class sound. So if we go to Spitfire Chamber Strings, what you've got is world-class players in a world-class space mixed by the world-class Jake Jackson. So you're also buying into the choices made by the producers and the mixers. Now, when I'm listening to a space, I will tend to put a short sample on, like a spiccato. That's I love it. It's one of my favorites, and because it's got character, it's got sort of ambience, but it's not out of control. I really like it. It's one of the things which I like most about the Spitfire sound is that sound of that space. I mean, sometimes it can be, for me, sometimes too lush, but remember, this is why you need to listen carefully to these samples and work out which space suits you best. Okay, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Germany. Let's go to the Teldec scoring stage in Berlin. And this is where Berlin Strings is recorded. If you look at the thing, you can see instantaneously that it's a slightly smaller space. It's a smaller, less ambient space. So what I'm expecting is a slightly less ambient sound. Oh, hang on. Yep. It's a slightly brighter sound. It is quite an ambient mix, but again, there's no reverb on this. This is just as it comes out of the box. Okay, so that's okay. Let me move on. I want to just showing you the difference between these things. Sony scoring stage, MGM in Los Angeles, big traditional scoring stage. You'd expect that kind of sound, and that's what you get with Cine Strings, because that's where that's recorded. It's a shorter, more controlled sound. And likewise, if you go to the Play library, you're going to get something quite similar, which is, here you go, where's Maida Vale? Oh no, there's East West, there we go. There's the East West, it stopped being Studio One Pictures, there we go. So it's a much smaller, more controlled space, so I'm going to expect something which is a bit much tighter. And what you'd expect to do with that is add reverb, and that's what we're going to come on and talk about next. So you can see it's a reasonable size space, but with a larger string section, you're going to hear less of the room and more of the instrument, which is sort of the balance which you're getting between the two. Now, what can you do about this? Once you've got bought into the room, you're obviously going to want to do one or two things to make it slightly different. And what you get the choice of is mic positions, and they're incredibly important. If we take, for example, our friends here, the BBC Symphony Orchestra, what we've got here is the Spiccato. This is recorded at the BBC Maida Vale studios, which, here we go, looks like that. There you go. So it's quite a large space, but with lots of baffling, so it's a manageable sound. Now, if you go to the mic positions, what you get is normally what they'll offer you is this. The default position tends to be a pre-mix, and it makes a huge amount of difference to the amount of memory you use. So that's pre-mixed. Okay, now if we turn that mix off and we do our own little mix, you have a choice of microphones. The tree is a Decca tree, which is a triangle. It's a equilateral triangle of microphones, which sits normally sort of about 10 feet above the conductor's position. So it's the sound of the orchestra if you were flying just above the conductor. And that tends to be the master sound. Then you've got outrigger microphones, which are left and right. And then you've got surround mics, which are either right at the back or right at the front. And then you get close mics, which are over the top of each section or each instrument. So you can mix these yourselves. So if you take the close out, let's just listen to the tree first of all. There you go. That's what it would sound like if you're 10 feet above the conductor. Bring the close mic in. Let's let it load up. It's just loading. This is the point. Every time you activate a new mic position, see, that's very, very tight. Now you bring in the trees as well. When you bring in more than one mic position, you're effectively doubling the amount of memory you're going to use. And then you can get a balance between close and tree. Shall we have some outriggers as well? Normally these three are how you would balance a sample. But this is using an almighty amount of memory. So you have to bear that in mind unless you have almost limitless capacity. But getting a mix up like that is an important thing to do. And if you're, some of these are very straightforward. So for example, all the Spitfire ones, if you right click on that, they default to some controllers, 22, 23 and 24, which on my setup here, I have preset on these buttons. So I can, as I'm working, I can do a quick little mix. So I can go, look, you can see all the little things going up and down. And so I can mix my microphones from the thing without actually going into the sample library to do it. Now, in addition to the mic positions, obviously you may well want, let's start with this very dry one. You can add reverb. Reverb is a very important tool. This is Cinematic Rooms, which I think is probably the best in the world when it comes to... And this is one of my favourite patches, which is Dark Hall. It's quite short. Hang on, let me just reload it, make sure. There we go. So it's 0.95 of a second. That's short. But what you're getting with that is the sound. What I'm dialing in there is the sound of a room. If I wanted a big sort of ambient finishing reverb, I'd use something like this with 2.5 seconds. So what a lot of the time you'll end up doing is using two reverbs. You'll use one, which might give you a big lush finishing one, which is going to be that one. And let's dial in another one. What I'm dialing in here is East-West Spaces. And that, to me, that looks like the Warner Brothers soundstage. It says Burbank score. I think that's Warner Brothers. I could be wrong. So that's the sound of the room. Now let's add in the sound of the extra reverb finishing. So you layer these two reverbs together and you end up with your own customized space. Now, I think it is, broadly speaking, better if you just focus on one manufacture, one space, and then all your brass and woodwind and all, they're all in the same space. So it sounds like they're more cohesive. But don't beat yourself up about this. I mean, if you're going to use different libraries, it's fine. It's fine. They all do. Some of them will need a bit more help in terms of ambience and things like that, and others possibly won't. Now, when you start using different mic positions, be aware that it can mess slightly with your stereo image. Most samples are recorded in situ. In other words, you'll hear a first violin off to the left and you hear a cello off to the right, just when you sort of fade the thing up. With the close mics, often it's in mono, so therefore you need to, or a close stereo, so you need to pan it to the right place. But you trust your ears and find a library which is right where the space, because the space is, I've recorded with a reasonably large section in a small room and it sounded terrible, and I've had 20 strings, 15 strings in a beautiful space like an old London studio called Whitfield Street, which is now sadly no longer with us, and it just sounded gorgeous. So half the number of players in a better space, and it just sounded wonderful. The space is everything. Okay, so just to recap at the end of this little week, you got to think like a player. So you've got to think, how would the player articulate this particular line? How am I going to put emotion into it using dynamics and controllers and things like that? Where is the appropriate use of legato, and which legato is going to work for this particular situation? What is the size of the section? Am I dealing with a big symphonic sound, or do I want something more chambery? And what happens when I play a chord? The pipe organ effect we were talking before. And finally, this room, which is so vital, this space, this ambience in which these samples are recorded. That is the final part in the thing. And if you make sure that every line is coherent and consistent and it sounds like a real person's playing it, when you put the whole thing together, it will sound massively better. If you just go smash it all in without worrying about articulations and all that, then it's going to come out sounding a bit okay, ongo thingamabobs of doubt. So look, I hope you found this useful. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, subscribe and download the PDF underneath. I'm going to be back not tomorrow, but at some point in the not too distant future, bringing all this together. We'll do a sort of longer scoring exercise, half an hour or something, where I'm actually going to sort of pull all these different ideas together and show you how it all goes into one box, so to speak. But for the time being, thanks for your company. See you again very soon.